Warning: these social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre. Good morning, everybody. How we doing? Spectre here on the 17th day of December here. And it is a not bad looking Friday out. Got sunshine, can't complain. Winds seem to have finally died down after the last couple days, and lots to get to on the broadcast here this morning. Obviously, we'll take a rundown through the old markets here this morning. We'll talk a little bit about U.S. housing starts net from yesterday's print. Pelosi rejecting the idea of congressional stock trading bans. Gee, there's a shocker. U.S. PMI is tumbling. We're going to get into CEOs of Southwest and American Airlines questioning need for masks. GM extending downtime for Bolt production. We're going to talk a little bit about Germany and Nord Stream 2. And of course, the semiconductor supply chain business and a whole smattering of other things here this morning. So stick around. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, Spectre here. Just wanted to give a big thank you to all you guys who continue to support my work. Jump in, day out on the streams, support all the various pieces I put out, etc., etc. And in doing so, I figured what the heck, we'll put some merch out there if you guys wish to continue to support and help defray some of the costs of streaming, which many of you guys know many of us incur. Got a handful of shirts and ad here. Spectre Does News. We got the Realize, Real Lies shirt and that you hear on my PSA periodically. And of course the No BS insignia from the show I do over on the 5x5 channel, all of which you can get for the low price of $19.99. Aside from that, you can get the Let's Go Brandon hashtag FJB shirt as well in a variety of colors. And I've recently added the hoodies in a variety of colors you can get right there as well. And last but not least, you can grab yourself a No BS shirt and the Zip Up hoodie as well. If you don't want any articles of clothing, well, you can grab yourself a mug or a 20-ounce water tumbler if you wish. Your choice. And of course, as always, just want to thank you, the listeners, the audience, those who are in chat day in, day out. Thank you for your continued support. All right into it we go here this morning. Weather-wise, well, we got a few systems moving across the old U.S. here this morning. It looks like we've got a little disturbance and perhaps a little system cruising across the upper west and that up around Idaho, Montana, Wyoming area, across the Dakotas into Minnesota. And then we got this little nugget cruising across here from Oklahoma, coming across Arkansas, Missouri, into Kentucky, Tennessee, etc., etc. And on the precip side, yeah, all this stuff up here, yeah, that's snow. You guys can keep that. But this guy down here, looks like you guys are going to get whacked here pretty good. That little dark spot heading toward Nashville area, that's the thing looks to be packing about 2 to 2.5 inches of rain right in there. So hopefully you guys have a canoe or a boat at the ready, because I think you're going to need it. Temperature-wise, let's see here. It looks like we're still fairly warm across the south to southeast, heading up the whole eastern seaboard. And then we get this big sucker cruising down. Yeah, hopefully that doesn't push far across the U.S. here for the better part of next week, but definitely got some chilly temps in behind that. So aside from that here this morning, into the stocks we go. Stocks yields tumble as quad-witching fears add to the broader market slide. U.S. futures tumbled after hitting an all-time high less than 24 hours ago as the favorable, if paradoxical, bounce and risk from the hawkish FOMC pivot faded from memory, and as investors questioned whether global stocks are due for a rough ride on the backdrop of growing risks from inflation and the Omicron virus variant. S&P 500 futures slumped about 0.5% Friday morning, while the U.S. 10-year Treasury yield fell for a second straight day to 1.394%, the lowest since December 6th. And here we see the old E-mini S&P futures, where that is tracking. Futures were dragged down by tech stocks as volatility surged amid mounting concerns about monetary tightening and the Omicron coronavirus variant. Yes, the variant strikes again. Rate hikes do not end bull markets, but reversal of central banks' liquidity means less speculative froth and more volatility, said Barclays strategist Emmanuel Cao. Policy angst may be here to stay, but following months of unclear guidances and conflicting signals, the direction of travel is clear now. Investors are also bracing for the quarterly rebalancing of the S&P 500 index after the market close and the triple witching expiration of equity derivatives that could magnify market moves. General Motors dropped on pre-market trading after the company said the cruise unit chief executive officer Dan Ammann is leaving the company. Interesting. And we're going to get into some GM news here in just a bit. It says here are some of the other notable pre-market movers today. Tesla shares fall as much as 2.4% in U.S. pre-market trading as CEO Elon Musk sells another chunk of shares in the electric vehicle maker. FedEx boosted its adjusted earnings per share forecast for the full year, with the guidance beating the average analyst estimate. Shares rose about 4.8% in pre-market trading. Spruce Biosciences shares soar as much as 30% in U.S. pre-market trading after Oppenheimer initiated coverage with an outperform rating and a $15 price target that implies 500% upside in the stock from Thursday's closing price. Cerner shares rise 17% U.S. pre-trading hours amid a report that Oracle is in talks to buy the medical records company for about $30 billion. Rivian Automotive shares slump 9% U.S. pre-market trading after the electric pickup maker reported results. Piper Sandler says that after-hours share price loss is noise and remains positive following the earnings call. General Motors dropped post-market after it said the Cruise chief executive officer Dan Ammann is leaving the company. Steelcase declined in the after-hours session after the furniture company recorded third-quarter revenue that missed the average analyst estimate due to supply chain disruptions. And U.S. Steel Corp shares declined pre-market after it warned fourth-quarter results will be lower than Wall Street had been expecting. Flashing down to the snapshot on the day, S&P 500 futures were down 0.8% to 46.35 even. Nikkei's down 1.8%, 28,545.68. Shanghai Composite down 1.2%, 36.32 and change. The stocks Europe 600 is down 0.6% to 473.64. Euro is little changed at 1.1330. Brent futures down 1.4% to 73.99 a barrel. Gold spot is up 0.5% to 1808.56 per ounce, and the U.S. dollar index little changed at 95.98. Aside from that, some overnight news out of Bloomberg. Boris Johnson suffered a seismic political upset as his ruling Conservatives lost a key parliamentary election, a result that will heap intense pressure on the UK Prime Minister and may even call his position into question. Leading central banksters made a big call this week, deciding that the coronavirus is no longer calling the shots in their economies, and inflation is now the bigger threat. Bank of France Governor Francois Villeroy de Galhau said the difference between the new forecast for 1.8% inflation in 2023 and 2024 and the ECB's 2% target is within the margin of uncertainty. In a Bundesbank report showing German inflation will run above 2% through 2024, Jens Wiedemann urged vigilance as he sees risks to the upside throughout the currency bloc. ECB Governing Council member Ali Rehn said there's considerable uncertainty about the path which inflation will take. Germany's main gauge of business expectations slipped to 92.6 in December, falling for a sixth month, according to the IFO Institute. That's a bigger decline than predicted by economists in a Bloomberg survey. Current conditions were also assessed as weaker than in November. EU leaders failed to reach a deal on how to react to the unprecedented gas crisis that sent energy prices to record levels after Poland and the Czech Republic demanded stronger action to cap the costs of pollution. And some other news out of News Squawk here. Back over to Asia. Japan expedites virus boosters for some as the Omicron looms. Hong Kong Stock Exchange to allow SPAC listings next month. Thailand may impose stock trading tax to lift government revenue. And Asian stocks drop as worries on global policy tightening linger. Back over to Europe. European gas plunges after Russia books pipeline at the last minute. Stellantis revamps auto finance business with BNP, according to Santander. Cellnex drops most in 11 months as CK Hutchinson deals woes. And Johnson suffers humiliating defeat in UK special election. As far as the calendar is concerned, not much scheduled here today, no economic events. But 1 p.m., we got the Fed's Waller discussing the economic outlook. So, quick rundown through the markets on the morning here. Back to yesterday, we had U.S. housing starts surged in November. It says after a mixed picture in October, starts down and permits were up, analysts expected both to rise in November, and they were right. Housing starts exploded in November, up a shocking 11.8% month over month after a downwardly revised 3.1% month over month drop in October. Building permits jumped 3.6% month over month after an upwardly revised up 4.2% month over month in October. Both were dramatically above expectations. And there we see the graphicals of that pointing back to, levels not seen since probably March of this year. Starts jump from their lowest since February 2021 to the highest since March. Yep, there we go. And it says the jump in starts was relatively evenly balanced between single-family and multifamily units, up 11.3% month over month and 12.9% month over month, respectively. It also says one wonders how long this will last, given the slump in mortgage apps and the Fed's new hawkish 6 hikes in 2 years plan. Now, mind you, mortgage rates are at all-time lows. However, if you can get lucky enough to get the capital or loans to make that happen, good luck, especially in today's economy. So aside from that, Speaker Pelosi is rejecting the idea of congressional stock trading ban, claiming we're a free market economy. Let that sink in for a second. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is worth, just $114 million, and just 2 months ago was railing about how capitalism has not served us well and needs improving, is all of a sudden a bold advocate for free market economics. All it took was potentially taking away her, and of course her husband's, stock trading privileges. Funny how that works, isn't it? We are a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that, Pelosi said of the idea of barring members of Congress from trading individual stocks while in office. If people aren't reporting, they should be, Pelosi responded to Insider, who asked for comment after 49 members of Congress and 182 staffers had violated the Stock Act that prevents insider trading. 49 members of Congress, 182 staffers. And in the words of Pelosi,
Madam Speaker, Insider just completed a 5-month investigation finding that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior congressional staffers have violated the Stock Act, the insider trading law. I'm wondering if you have any reaction to that, and secondly, should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress?
No, I don't know to the second one. We have a responsibility to report in the stock, on the stock, but I'm not familiar with that 5-month review, but if people aren't reporting, they should be. Because this is a free market and we're a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that. Yes, ma'am.
But do free market economies typically allow insider trading? I seem to recall, and I'll digress here for one moment. In my corporate days, we had this little thing called ethics. And of course, every year, every single year, we had to go through this and basically put the check in the box, say we had been through this sort of training, put it in our stack of stuff, if you will, of things that had to get checked off by year's end. And of course, every year you'd have to go through this deal and talk about ethics and insider trading and things of that nature. And that's for obviously the little people inside said corporations. But for some reason, this little free market capitalism deal seems to work just a little bit differently, apparently, if you're a politician. Not sure why. The stance puts Pelosi immediately at odds with both Senator Elizabeth Warren and Rep. AOC, who have spoken out against members of Congress trading individual stocks. It is absolutely ludicrous that members of Congress can hold and trade individual stocks while in office, AOC said earlier this year via Twitter. The access and influence we have should be exercised for the public interest, not our profit. It shouldn't be legal for us to trade individual stocks with the info we have. But yet they do. Warren referred to the trading by members of Congress as brazenness when asked by Insider for comment. Gee, let's do a little open the books expose on Warren and take a look at what she deals in. So as she continued, we need both tougher laws and enforcement of those laws, the Massachusetts Democrat said. The American people should never have to guess whether or not an elected official is advancing an issue or voting on a bill based on what's good for the country or what's good for their own personal financial interests. This out of, obviously, Pocahontas here. But I'm thinking back here. It's only been within the last week. I think we saw a report come out that said that about 75 members of Congress have had benefit because of all of the COVID business, meaning that they probably have stocks in the Pfizers, the Modernas, the Johnson and Johnsons, and the like. So do you think there's really a willingness of the quote-unquote representatives to change a thing? Quote the Raven says, "We are a free market economy," says a woman, "probably insider trading, pushing for socialist programs, advocating for endless regulation, endorsing full modern monetary theory, and trying to micromanage commodity markets with a state-run economy and price controls." And Town Hall has a reporter. Should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress? And of course, Pelosi, as we saw, no, we are a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that. We noted back in April of this year that Pelosi's husband was using call options to buy names like Microsoft ahead of lucrative government contracts. Recall, we wrote in September that Pelosi's criticism of capitalism was that it had historically allowed workers' wages, as well as management's, to rise alongside productivity. Doing her best Karl Marx impression, Pelosi said at the time, "You cannot have a system where the success of some springs from the exploitation of the workers and springs from the exploitation of the environment and the rest. And we have to correct that." But we guess that line no longer plays, right, Nancy? So yes, Nancy Antoinette, you get scraps. Anyway, I'm sure nothing will change as a result. U.S. PMIs tumble in early December glimpse and cost burdens soar. After falling modestly in November, markets' preliminary December manufacturing and services PMI were both expected to rebound, even as U.S. macro surprise data started to disappoint, but the analysts were wrong. Market U.S. manufacturing PMI dropped from 58.3 to 57.8, below the 58.5 expected, a 12-month low, and market U.S. services PMI dropped from 58 to 57.5, below expectation, a 3-month low. That is the second straight monthly decline. Inflationary pressures continued to mount, with the firms facing ever-increasing input prices. The pace of cost inflation accelerated again to reach a fresh series record. Companies reported broad-based upticks in cost burdens, with a range of key materials noted higher in price alongside soaring transportation and distribution fees. The U.S. Composite PMI Output Index posted 56.9 in December, down slightly from 57.2 in November. And here we see how that is tracking here month to month, year over year. It says, commenting on the PMI data, Chris Williamson, chief business economist at IHS Markit, said, the survey data paint a picture of an economy showing encouraging resilience to rising virus infection rates and worries over the Omicron variant. Everybody's got to throw the variant in. Business growth slipped only slightly during the month and held up especially well in the vulnerable service sector. Manufacturing output growth even picked up slightly amid a marked easing in the number of supply chain delays, which also helped to take pressure off raw material prices. Barring the initial price slide seen at the start of the scamdemic, December saw the steepest fall in factory input price inflation for nearly a decade. The worry is that rising wage growth, greater transport costs, and higher energy prices have pushed service sector cost inflation to a new high, and that any renewed disruption to global supply lines resulting from the Omicron wave could lead to renewed upward pressure on goods prices. Is Powell tightening into a slowdown? Obviously. And of course, we'll see the Fed make a big policy error. And from that, we go into CEOs of Southwest and American Airlines questioning the need for masks on planes. Let's see, how long have, for you folks, Ned, who still travel by plane, how long have they had these mask, quote unquote, mandates in place to be able to fly? How long's it been? And I guess finally the CEOs of a couple are finally perhaps coming to their wits and starting to ask questions. Why so long to come to that question or perhaps even conclusions? The CEOs of Southwest and American Airlines are challenging the need to wear masks on airplanes, saying they don't believe they do much to limit exposure to COVID-19. Or maybe some people slid them a couple studies that showed that masks absolutely do not work. I don't know. Doug Parker, CEO of American Airlines, the nation's largest carrier, and Gary Kelly, CEO of Southwest, made the comments during a hearing about federal financial support received in 2020 and 2021. The comments were in response to a question from Senator Roger Wicker, the ranking Republican on the committee, according to Clown News. Kelly and Parker, both of whom will be retiring in the coming months, said that high-grade HEPA air filters employed on modern airplanes already capture virtually all airborne contamination, and air quality is improved by the frequent exchange of fresh air from outside the cabin. I concur. An aircraft is the safest place you can be, said Parker. As true of all of our aircraft, they all have the same HEPA filters and airflow. Says after the hearing, American Airlines tried to walk back Parker's remarks. It issued a statement claiming that his concurrence with Kelly was on the point about the quality of the air in the aircraft cabin, not mask requirements. Sarah Nelson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, testified at the hearing that not all aircraft are equipped with the same quality of air filters. For example, some older planes do not have HEPA filters, she said. And again, according to Clown News. I think that is probably for the medical community to decide rather than me, said Nelson. What I will add is that the studies that have been done on masks were done with mannequins that were sitting straight forward with masks on, not removing them, not eating. It is important to recognize that the safe, controlled environment on planes, including the HEPA filters, that are not on all aircraft, she added. Masks have been required on planes ever since the CDC issued guidance on the matter. Senator Ed Markey grilled the CEOs over the mask comments. I'm shocked that some of the CEOs here today have suggested we no longer need mask mandates on planes, he said. In the face of Omicron, children under 5 who still cannot be vaccinated, and that we still allow unvaccinated people on planes. Oh, terrible, the audacity of them. Markey added that it was immoral to suggest that people on planes be forced to be sit next to the unvaccinated, unmasked passengers. Hey, Markey, why don't you just come out and state what you really mean? Put a big yellow star on all of them. Why don't we do that? Would that satisfy you? To that, Nelson agreed that it wasn't time to lift the mask mandate. I believe that the government has taken a very responsible approach to this, she said. We believe it should continue to stay in place. It's a workplace safety issue. Except it's not, because it doesn't do a friggin' thing. We do need a consistent message, though. It troubles me to hear different messages. I hope we are going to stay on the same messages and follow the medical experts and do what's necessary to keep everybody safe. Right. Follow the pseudoscience. The real studies show, if they were to bother to look, would show that they don't do squat. Meanwhile, Delta CEO Ed Bastian thinks 2022 will be a recovery year, but a profitable recovery year. Speaking from the carrier's Investor Day in New York, he added that Omicron will be the dominant strain over the next couple weeks. We know it will delay the international recovery probably by 3 to 4 months, and that there will be no discernible impact on domestic demand aside from some fallout in quarter one. And here we see it says, when will business travel come back? No one knows, said Delta CEO Bastian, sage words. So there you have it in the words of a handful of CEOs from the plane folks, the airlines and that, the Deltas, the American Airlines, and Southwest. But if they keep hyping up the Omicron, which is in and of itself a nothing burger, then they deserve what's coming. Hopefully nobody flies on their stinking planes. Let's get some competition brought back in and quit buying up all the little guys that has happened with all the consolidations over the years. Let's see what happens then. Aside from that, GM extends downtime for Bolt production through February amid massive recall. So for all of you EV owners out there, if you own a Tesla, if you own a GM, what have you, GM has got some issues apparently still with her little Bolt. So after a series of recalls that we have documented, General Motors Company's Chevrolet Bolt EV and EUV production will remain down through February, according to the Detroit News. GM first took the Orion assembly plant in Lake Orion offline in the week of August 23rd due to recall repairs. The plant briefly returned online in the first 2 weeks of November, but has been down since November 15th and will remain down through February. The automaker prioritizes fixing recalled bolts instead of making new vehicles. Says GM has notified employees at Orion Assembly the plant will extend downtime through February 2022 to continue prioritizing recall repairs, GM spokesman Dan Flores said in a statement. We will continue to inform employees at the appropriate time of any additional production schedule adjustments as we continue to focus on battery module replacements, Flores said. Now, readers may recall that the automaker has asked Bolt owners to park at least 50 feet from other vehicles because the vehicles' batteries have spontaneously combusted. It says we are aware of 12 GM confirmed battery fires that have been investigated involving Bolt EV vehicles in the previous and new recall population, Flores told the local paper back in mid-September. In total, GM has recalled more than 141,000 bolts for battery fire risk. The automaker plans to transition the plant to make electric trucks based. So apparently, yeah, just like Tesla, and for those who follow Musk and Tesla and everything else, know that they too have a little bit of an issue, but perhaps not to the same degree that GM does. Yeah, you can burn that sucker down. And I just love this part here that you need to park 50 feet away from other vehicles and I guess perhaps other structures. And I guess I'm thinking of, perhaps these recharging stations and that they want to put all across the country here. What's going to happen if somebody's car melts down here and takes out about another 2 or 3 cars beside it? Uh-oh. Seems there's going to be a little problem, huh? Anyway, I don't think they really think this stuff through too much. Bottom line, it's nuts. Germany won't approve Nord Stream 2 until July. EU natural gas soars to new record high. European gas futures surged to a record high Thursday after Germany said natural gas flows to Europe via Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline won't be made before July, according to Bloomberg. Germany's federal network agency, Bundesnetz, however you say that, Bundesnetzagentur, halted Nord Stream 2's certification process in mid-November. The regulator requested the Swiss-based operator of the pipeline, Russia's Gazprom PJSC, to set up a German subsidiary to comply with European regulations. As soon as that happens, the certification process will resume. Speaking at a press conference, Boon's president, Jochen Hohmann, said a decision won't be made in the first half of 2022. Following Homann's comments, the Dutch month-ahead gas European benchmark soared to a new record high of €135, up more than 650% year-on-year. How would you like to be living in Europe right now and having to depend on natural gas for heat, knowing that these clowns are jacking around with a perfectly good new pipeline that's been built, but stuck because of bureaucratic red tape? Think they planned that, folks? I tend to believe they do. Says the Nord Stream 2 was completed in September and is supposed to come online in early 2021, but that appears not the case anymore. Europe is dealing with winter supply concerns as the state of gas storage stocks dwindles. And of course, we've tracked this a bunch in recent weeks. Russian gas flows via the Yamal Europe pipeline that runs across Belarus and Poland to Melnau, Germany, continue to run at depressed levels, another reason for elevated gas prices. And there we see the Russian natural gas sent and well off the mark from previous norms. Says we must point out the region's low stockpiles, depressed gas flows into the country, geopolitical concerns, and cold weather will likely bid gas prices throughout the northern hemisphere winter. However, the situation in the U.S. is entirely the opposite. Warm weather and an abundance of gas have depressed prices. European natural gas has never been more expensive relative to U.S. prices. And of course, we've talked a little bit about that as well. I think the previous graph showed that probably back around July of this year is where we saw the divergence. U.S. was tracking down here, whereas Europe's prices were through the roof. Says while record high prices are enough of a problem, for context, this is equivalent to a $270 price for a barrel of crude oil, strongly suggesting the pressure to switch must be building, and with it demand for crude, which could scupper Biden's cunning plan to lower U.S. gasoline prices. And here we see the oil barrel equivalents. Yeah, there's the graph I was thinking of right there. EU gas, UK gas, and yeah, it goes all the way back to July, where a bit of a split seems to have taken place. Says without the Nord Stream 2 flowing, power prices across the continent will continue to soar. And Javier Blas says European energy crisis, a map is worth 1,000 words, and in case a few words are needed, that day-ahead electricity price is a record for Germany and much of the rest of Europe. So, interesting. Germany is shooting itself and the rest of Europe in the foot by not allowing the Nord Stream 2 to come online as winter is just 5 days away. It's all about control, isn't it? I don't think these governments in Europe really have the people in mind, whether it be talking about the COVID business, whether it be talking about energy. It's almost like the overarching plan is to try and have a mass kill-off, if you look at it. Just my take on it anyway. But aside from that, visualizing the global semiconductor supply chain, interesting graphic out of Visual Capitalist here today we'll walk through. Our digitally driven society is powered by an extremely robust semiconductor supply chain. And until the COVID-19 scamdemic, not many people thought about it. But as Visual Capitalist Omri Wallach details below, a sudden surge in demand for digital goods, improved technologies, and recovering economies put the strain and spotlight directly on semiconductors. The millions of digital devices we use, from smartphones to electric cars, computers, robotics, and the businesses they enable, only function thanks to the intricate chips built on semiconductors. By some estimates, up to 22.5% of global GDP is made up by the global digital economy. This graphic from ASE Global highlights the complex and global semiconductor supply chain that powers our modern world. So I think we'll walk through that because it is rather interesting for those that don't know. Where do you find your semiconductors? Anywhere from smartphones to electric cars, computers, industrial machines, as well as the many global businesses they enable. Semiconductors are changing the world. The 22.5% they highlighted of the global GDP is made up by the global digital economy. In 2020, semiconductors that is, accounted for about 400 billion, and by the year 2035 estimates, it's going to be a $1 trillion market. Says in fact, semiconductors are the world's fourth most traded product. The more digital our world becomes, the more critical the enabling roles of semiconductors, chips, and integrated circuits become. Everything from crude oil to motor vehicles and parts, refined oil, etc., etc. What is a semiconductor, you ask? Well, semiconductors are highly specialized devices that provide the backbone for any electronic product to operate. Most are integrated circuits or chips, a set of miniaturized circuits composed of billions of transistors, diodes, capacitors, and resistors layered on a silicon chip just a few square millimeters wide. Super tiny. And it highlights the wired and wireless infrastructure accounts for about 8.1% of all semiconductors, these per 2019 figures. Automotive is about 9.8%. Consumer electronics is about 10%. Industrial electronics, 11.7%. Servers, data centers, and storage accounts for about 14.6%. Personal computing is about 20.5%. And smartphones account for about 25.3% of all semiconductors. And there we see that says, how do semiconductor chips make their way from concept to consumer? An integrated semiconductor supply chain that involves thousands of companies and millions of people around the world, forming the backbone of today's digital economy. So it starts off with a design created for either specific or general product usage. Everything from fabless semiconductor companies, electronic manufacturers, independent design companies, etc., etc. Then it goes to manufacturing for the front end. Silicon wafers are processed through a complex and extensive series of manufacturing steps. Each wafer is diced into multiple chips and devices. The second part of the manufacturing on the back end, chips are assembled into packages to form the electronic components that can be mounted onto circuit boards. And we see the packaged chips are then tested under different electrical and temperature conditions till you get to the end product, the integration. Chips are integrated by EMS and OEM companies to create end products. Says 0.58 trillion is the global market size for EMS and OEMs in 2020, expected to go to over $1 trillion in coming years. Consumption-wise, end products are shipped to companies, retailers, and consumers worldwide for a growing number of applications. And there we see many of the end products, and we just discussed that. So where does ASE fit in? Well, every company in the semiconductor supply chain has a unique role. Positioned as a critical link in the chain, ASE is the leading global provider of semiconductor manufacturing services in assembly and test. They account for 30% of the global OSAT market shares in 2021, 3 trillion chips manufactured, and 37 plus years fueling the high growth electronics industry. Markets enabled by ASE and semiconductors, we get 5G, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, automotive, smart factories, quantum computing, and data processing. And we get the semiconductor, package module, integrator, system OEMs, content, service, etc., etc. So kind of a neat little rundown of what a semiconductor is, where it all goes, market share wise, what percentage goes toward what, and even a little bit of a walkthrough of the manufacturing process to kind of get you an idea. The rest of it goes on to state, I think, pretty much what we already covered here. but wraps up and says, unlocking the potential of the digital economy. The companies that make up the semiconductor supply chain are spread all over the globe, from the US to China, South Korea, Taiwan, and Germany. A finished chip can contain components that have traveled more than 25,000 miles by the time of final product integration. It is a complicated but necessary supply chain that empowers the technology of the present and the future. From advances in 5G and AI to smart factories and advances in automotive and quantum computing, the companies in the semiconductor supply chain make it all possible. And I think there was one figure in here. I'm going to have to go back and find this now that I saw was rather intriguing. And I thought it was in this graphic talking about automotive, where there are, where did it state that? Something like 1,400 chips, I think, in a typical automobile. I don't know where that went. Oh, here it is. Yeah, the average car is packed with 1,400 semiconductors that control everything from airbags to the engine. How many of you knew that? 1,400 chips inside your typical vehicle these days. And we wonder why we can't work on anything ourselves without having to take it into a shop and have them put the old scanner on it and get the OBD readouts on all that stuff to figure out what the hell's going on with it, right? Crazy. So aside from that, getting a little bit out of financials, but over to hot air, we get how is there no public record of congressional insider trading? And I guess there's a little bit of a follow-on piece to perhaps Pelosi's comments in recent days. It says, I really want to offer a tip of the hat to Business Insider for uncovering a story this week that should really have Americans up in arms in a bipartisan fashion. When I learned about it last night, I felt both frustrated and disappointed. The report deals with the Stock Act, a law signed by President Obama back in 2012. The acronym stands for the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act, and it's intended to prevent members of the House and the Senate, as well as their staffers, from using knowledge of impending congressional actions that might impact the fortunes of publicly traded companies to profit by trading in those companies' stocks. Part of the law requires that members file annual reports of all of their stock trades, with financial penalties being imposed on anyone who is late with their filings. But as Insider discovered, many members have regularly been late with their filings, and there is no publicly available record of such infractions or any fines imposed as a result. See, it's one thing to pass a law, right? It's another thing to enforce it, and any sort of ramifications and or penalties as a result. Congress has a spotty and inconsistent method for collecting fines from members and top staffers who break a federal law designed to stop insider trading and conflicts of interest, as Insider investigation found. Insider's investigation of financial disclosures found that 49 members of Congress and at least 182 of the highest paid Capitol Hill staffers were late in filing their stock trades during 2020 and 2021. Lawmakers and senior congressional staffers who blow past the deadlines established by the 2012 Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act are supposed to pay a late fee of $200 the first time. Increasingly higher fines follow if they continue to be late, potentially costing tens of thousands of dollars in extreme cases. So basically, they just get a little slap on the wrist of a couple $100. That's probably a typical DC lunch these days. So, in just the past 2 years, there have been hundreds of people in Washington who were either late in filing their stock trading records or failed to report the information at all. And yet, Congressional Ethics Office staffers would not even confirm for reporters whether a ledger recording all of these violations and the fines being levied even exists, to say nothing of making such records publicly available. When Insider asked all of the lawmakers who appeared to be in violation to confirm their status and report any fines that had been paid, 19 of them refused to even answer, and another 10 said they had paid fines, but declined to provide any receipts proving they had paid. The situation is preposterous. The people in charge of imposing regulations or fines on companies shouldn't be able to ditch their stocks before the information becomes public. Similarly, the lawmakers involved in awarding fat government contracts to corporations should not be allowed to scurry out and buy up those stocks before they rise dramatically. This is one of the most egregious examples of insider trading that can take place. So, in 2012, we actually managed to pass a law ensuring full transparency in such matters, which was great. But now we find out that the records related to that transparency law are shrouded in secrecy, if they even exist at all. It's a classic case of adding insult to injury. I realize that this may not sound like the biggest deal in the world at the moment, particularly when we're already dealing with the scamdemic, staggering inflation, the Biden border crisis, and foreign policy disasters too numerous to mention. But Stock Act violations get down to the most fundamental level of how much trust we can actually place in the people we elect to represent us and their staff members. I plan on calling both of my senators and my congresswoman this week. I would like to respectfully request that you do the same. Ask them if they are in compliance with the law and if they support making all records associated with it public. If they say no to either, you should probably start shopping for a primary opponent because some of these people clearly can't be trusted. And that's exactly right. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that most of these clowns in Congress, whether it be the upper or lower chambers, House or Senate, do not come out rich without having some level of compensation beyond their typical wage. Right? And we just stated, even with old Nancy Pelosi there, currently sitting at about 114 million in quote unquote wealth. Do you think that's really all from just her salary she takes home? Or the fact that she's actually Speaker of the House, which gets her a little bit of a bump up? Of course not. They've benefited greatly from this. It's time to put an end to it. Aside from that, out of Judicial Watch, don't know if you guys saw this, but Judicial Watch records detailed U.S. Embassy concerns about China's anal swab COVID testing of U.S. diplomatic personnel. So speaking of the a-holes over in Congress, we'll jump to this, I guess. But yeah, perhaps you might recall that this was a thing, apparently. What's it been, about a year ago? They decided they were going to enact this for diplomats over in China. And I think we kind of laughed it off, but apparently it's kind of a real deal. Judicial Watch announced today that it received 8 pages of email communications from the U.S. Department of State revealing concerns by the U.S. Embassy in Beijing that U.S. diplomatic personnel were being asked to submit to an anal swab COVID testing policy. The redacted documents show that as many as 2 people were either asked or required to take in an anal test for COVID by the Chinese government. 2 people. Judicial Watch obtained the records in response to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the State Department for non-identifying records of U.S. diplomatic personnel being subjected to invasive COVID-19 anal swab tests by the Chinese government. And if you wish to follow that, that's the Judicial Watch versus U.S. Department of State. There's the case number. And it says this lawsuit was filed after the State Department failed to respond to a June 18, 2021 FOIA request for all records about U.S. diplomatic personnel in or seeking to enter China being subjected to anal swab tests for the COVID-19 virus, including all complaints and communications regarding such testing. This request does not seek any personal identifying information of U.S. diplomatic personnel that may have been subjected to such testing. And on January 25th of this year, an unidentified General Services officer in the U.S. Embassy, Beijing, sent emails to personnel evidently under quarantine after traveling to China under the subject line, testing guidance. Sorry for the strange questions, but I was directed by embassy management to survey our people and ensure we are not being asked to participate in the more invasive testing procedures. The sender also writes, there's no good way to ask this, but has any health authority asked you or your spouse to conduct an anal swab test? The embassy obviously does not authorize or permit this type of testing on diplomats, but others have been asked, so I need to verify everyone's experience. The testers may also ask to do an environmental test, where they enter the residence and swab drinking glasses, furniture, etc. This is also not permitted. They may swab the outside of the doorknob, but nothing internal. For the record, our agreement is for nasal and or throat swabs only. If you are asked to undergo either of the above or any other that seems inappropriate, please refuse and contact us immediately. We will escalate to China's MFA FAO for an area officer and go from there. It says one recipient responds on January 26, no, I have had no unusual requests. I received a nasal and throat swab when I arrived in Shanghai and just a throat swab before departing. Beginning at 10:34 p.m. on January 26, another unidentified sender emails to an unidentified recipient under subject line test. Redacted. Please call me at your convenience. Time redacted. Below text messages came from redacted. This is not good. 10:39 recipient responds. This is becoming so non-diplomatic status testing. Disgusting. I hope the GSO and VIP Beijing visits can do something about this. I am so disgusted right now. Sender responds at 11:49 p.m. the next day. At this point, if they will insist the anal test, we would just like to go back to the States. And this is going to go on for a while here, some of the findings out of the FOIA here. But being we were talking about some a-holes in Congress and their insider trading business, I thought it was rather fitting to discuss this here this morning. I don't know. I guess I'll just leave it right there. Let's see. Over to Business Insider. Delaware judge rejects Fox News request to throw out Dominion's defamation lawsuit regarding the 2020 election. A worker passes by. All right, it says a Delaware judge has rejected Fox News' motion to dismiss Dominion's defamation lawsuit. The voting systems company sued Fox News in March 2021 for airing election fraud lies. The judge said it's reasonably conceivable that Dominion has a claim for defamation. It says a Delaware judge rejected Fox News' request to throw out Dominion Voting Systems' defamation lawsuit against the conservative media giant on Thursday. Are they really still conservative? I don't know. Who watches Fox these days? Says the decision opens the door for the company to obtain internal communications and other evidence from the network. A settlement is also more likely outcome now that the motion to dismiss is off the table. For purposes of the motion, the court must view all well-pled facts alleged in the complaint as true and in a light most favorable to Dominion. Delaware Superior Court Judge Eric Davis wrote in the ruling. On March 26, Dominion filed the defamation lawsuit against Fox News, seeking $1.6 billion in damages, claiming that the network gave prominence to the election fraud claims as a tactic to revive viewership as ratings dropped after President Donald Trump's loss. Dominion manufactures and sells the electronic voting hardware, software, and voting machines, and was repeatedly targeted with conspiracies in the wake of the 2020 election. Specifically in its suit, Dominion claimed that Fox News sold a false story of election fraud in order to serve its own commercial purposes, severely injuring Dominion in the process. Yes, they were totally damaged. 2 months later, Fox News filed to dismiss the motion, and the only Fox News host directly implicated in the lawsuit is Maria Bartiromo. Two of Trump's attorneys who led the efforts to overturn the results of the election, Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, also made false election claims on Fox News and have been separately sued for defamation by both Dominion and Smartmatic. Powell responded to Dominion's lawsuit against her by tweeting that the lawsuit is baseless and filed to harass, intimidate, and to drain our resources as we seek the truth of hashtag Dominion voting system's role in this fraudulent election. Giuliani said in a statement that he welcomed Dominion's lawsuit against him, suggesting that he had not previously done a thorough investigation of Dominion's practices. In Thursday's ruling, Davis wrote that Fox possessed countervailing evidence of election fraud from the Department of Justice, election experts, and Dominion at the time it had been making its statements. Davis wrote that in seeking to dismiss the lawsuit, Fox News contended that many of its hosts debunked election lies. Yet certain Fox personnel, in effect Mr. Dobbs, continued to push the fraud claims, Davis wrote, appearing to reference former Fox Business host Lou Dobbs. The nearby presence of dissenting colleagues thus further suggests Fox, through personnel like Mr. Dobbs, was knowing or reckless in reporting the claims. And in his rejection, Davis wrote that the court found that it is reasonably conceivable that Dominion has a claim for defamation per se. Says, as we have maintained, Fox News, along with every single news organization across the country, vigorously covered the breaking news surrounding the unprecedented 2020 election, providing full context of every story with in-depth reporting and clear-cut analysis, a spokesperson for Fox told Insider in a statement. We remain committed to defending against the baseless lawsuit and its all-out assault on the First Amendment. And of course, Insider reached out to Dominion for comment and got nothing back. So there you have it. It appears that Dominion is still marching on with the Fox side of things. I haven't heard as of late where that stands with old Sidney Powell and or Rudy Giuliani. I believe the terms were largely the same. I think, if I recall correctly, both Sidney and Giuliani were both $1.6 billion defamation lawsuits. And all I can say is open the books. Let's get at it. Have at it. If Dominion wants to continue to press, then they should have no problem providing all sorts of evidence to prove their case, right? All right. Aside from that, some shenanigans going on the Hill yesterday. Looked like the Build Back Better deal is probably going to not get done this year. Kristen Sinema wrecks Biden's hopes of destroying federal election integrity laws, and the Democrats panic. Says Kristen Sinema might as well join the Republican Party immediately. Her opposition to the extremist Dem agenda is quickly making her persona non grata in the Dem Party, but would get tons of Republican voters should she switch parties. Her latest act against Democratic extremism is killing the Democratic bill known as the We Can Cheat Forever Vote Fraud Bill. I like that. Says the bill would enshrine the change in voting laws enacted in 2020 that allowed Dems to win through fake mail-in ballots. Her office also reports that she will not support killing the filibuster. They would have to kill the filibuster in order to pass the voter fraud bill. Her office said she would support a voter bill if Republicans sign off on it too. But aside from Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell, there are not enough rhinos to pull that off without killing the filibuster. Biden said, if we can get the congressional voting rights done, we should do it. There's nothing domestically more important than voting rights. Sinema's spokesperson, John LeBombard, said she continues to support the Senate's 60-vote threshold to protect the country from repeated radical reversals in federal policy, which would cement uncertainty, deepen divisions, and further erode Americans' confidence in our government. Further erode? I don't know. I don't know if we can get much lower than whale crap at this point, but I don't know too many people who trust or have confidence in said government. Senator Sinema has asked those who want to weaken or eliminate the filibuster to pass voting rights legislation, which she supports if it would be good for our country to do so. And out of Breitbart News says Sinema's position has caused congressional Dems concern that 2020's pandemic-centric election laws will not be applied in 2022, such as voting by mail and other weakened measures. temporary 2020 election laws reverting back to pre-scamdemic rules likely reduce the Dems' ability to win elections. So good. To that I say. And it says, I don't want to become too dramatic, Rep. Emmanuel Cleaver told Politico on Thursday, but voting rights may be the only thing we have to at least halt the trek away from democracy. Rep. James Clyburn also voiced concerns that if election integrity laws are reinstated before the 2022 midterms, America's democratic republic will no longer exist. I don't want it to be constrained by trying to do it before the end of the year. I don't know that what you have to do before the end of the year, Clyburn told Politico. I just want us to get a bill done that will help preserve this democracy, because if we don't, I think we've lost this democracy. All about their democracy, right? Democracy, democracy, democracy. All about the democracy. Screw your democracy. I don't care about your majority rule BS. That's not what this republic was founded on. So, frankly, Clyburn, let's see, Cleaver, take a hike. Hopefully you guys get primaried. If it's not your time, then next time around, you're gonna. And last but not least on the morning here, and on a bit of a high note here, but Georgia Supreme Court sides with the second. Out of Bearing Arms here. Says it's nice to be able to cover some good news for gun owners on Bearing Arms Cam and Company, and the unanimous decision handed down by the Georgia Supreme Court this week is very good news indeed for those of us who recognize the Second Amendment protects a fundamental and substantive right to both keep and bear arms. On Tuesday, the state's high court rejected an argument by DeKalb County officials who'd claimed that when the background checks for concealed carry applicants come back with incomplete information, county probate judges are within their rights to deny an applicant their license. Instead, the justices sided with plaintiff Clinton Bell, who had been denied his carry license because his background check showed that he'd been arrested for pointing a gun at someone back in 1986. But the check did not include any information about the ultimate disposition of the case. Bell, for the record, was never prosecuted. Under Georgia law, a probate judge, has 10 days from receiving the background report to either grant or deny an application. Licenses cannot be issued for a number of reasons, such as whether the applicant has a felony conviction, a conviction for carrying a weapon without a license, certain mental health issues, or a conviction for a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence. In recent years, probate courts have been deluged with applications for carry licenses. In 2020 alone, there were more than 291,000 applications statewide, according to court records. Cherokee County Probate Judge Keith Wood said many reports show applicants have no criminal histories or, if they do, show the dispositions of their cases. But it is not out of the ordinary for judges to get incomplete reports with outcomes that are hard to track down. Says we're relying on agencies to input information into the system, said Wood, who chairs the Weapons Carry License Committee for the Council of Probate Court Judges of Georgia. Sometimes it's not done correctly. Now, that may be a problem for the law enforcement agencies and even the probate judges, but it absolutely should not be a disqualifying factor for those wishing to carry a firearm in self-defense. We're talking about the exercise of a constitutionally protected right, and that shouldn't be taken away from someone based on the possibility that they might not be eligible to exercise that right. Instead, the burden should be on the state to prove that the individual cannot legally own or carry a firearm. Thankfully, the Georgia Supreme Court agrees. Justice Verda Colvin, who wrote the Supreme Court opinion, said Georgia law says a probate judge shall issue a license unless there's a factual finding the applicant is ineligible for one. Mere speculation or uncertainty about an applicant's qualifications for a weapon carry license cannot support a determination that an applicant is ineligible or disqualified, Colvin wrote. The justice added that the court was unpersuaded by the county's argument that probate judges should be given greater discretion to deny carry licenses to protect the public from dangerous people. Balancing policy considerations is a job for the General Assembly, Colvin wrote. It is not for us to second guess the General Assembly's policy determinations. Colvin, who's the newest justice on the state Supreme Court, is spot on in her reasoning here. We simply cannot allow the government to deprive people of their rights because of failures or flaws on the part of governmental agencies, at least not without violating those individual rights. Now, it may be difficult or even impossible in some circumstances to go back and improve record keeping and submissions to NICS or state-based background check systems. But that's not a justification to keep people at arm's length from their right to keep and bear arms. So perhaps a little bit of a win there for the folks down in Georgia here. But I guess I have perhaps a little bit of a different opinion in that regard, and that what you saw noted there was one, they're talking about licensing and also kind of using that in the same vernacular as your right under the Bill of Rights, which, by the way, just the other day was the 230th birthday of the Bill of Rights. They don't go hand in hand. On the one hand, you don't carry a license, which is a permission slip, to use your rights. That isn't exactly how that works. Your rights are inherent, first and foremost, right? You don't need a permission slip to use your rights. So in one area, I agree that yes, perhaps they might have been a little bit overbearing with the ruling in it, albeit good, and those who want to play within the system. But they really have no authority here. You do not need a permission slip. As much as they want to try and regulate that and everything else, no. All we need is a Second Amendment, period. Nothing else. And until people start to realize that and awaken to that notion, the better off we're going to be. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for this morning. Appreciate you guys tuning in, as always, to the broadcast here on this Friday the 17th. 1 week left here before Christmas, 2 weeks left on the year, time winding down, 2022 just ahead of us. Let's end it with a bang. Get out, get some sunshine, get a little vitamin D in your system, and be well, folks. Have a great weekend. Take care. God bless, and I'll see you back next week.